Cast your mind back to the start of 2001, over 20 years ago, when I was the editor of what was then known as Jaguar Monthly magazine. Back then I was introducing Jaguar R2 F1 Challenger as the company endeavoured to go into its second season of Formula One. I test drove the newly introduced S-Type Sport, but the star of the issue was a 2001 model year XKR Coupe. And here today I've been reunited with that exact car. So we thought we'd meet up with its current owner and take a drive and seeing as it's good as I remember it. So here I am, reunited with a Jaguar XKR that I first drove over 20 years ago. And I've got to say, the first thing I really must comment on is just quite how well this car has lasted. Sue, the current owner, has obviously looked after it very well indeed. It's got 144,000 miles on the clock and the paintwork is exceptionally good condition. The interior has stood up very well. I believe she's had the side bolster refurbished, but otherwise the interior is exactly as it would have left the factory. This is a really good vintage of XKR as well. This is the 2001 model year. There are a few really sort of detailed but worthwhile changes that Jaguar made at the time. Starting at the front end, the fog lights are now flush fitting to the bumper rather than recessed as they were on the earlier cars. The tail lights have got a nice little chrome trim and the number plate has got a chrome finisher with an external boot release. And then inside they put some better seats. They were certainly more heavily bolstered. Laughably, they introduced a new high-tech at the time in-car phone from Motorola. It's still in here actually in the centre console. Much lauded at the time for having supposedly excellent reception and you know, you could carry on a long distance call for many miles, but you had to keep putting your SIM card from your phone into the new car phone, and if you didn't remember to take it out you go back into your house and then have to come back out again. So I don't know, bravo for Bluetooth is what I say. They were very much about the technology with the 2001 model year. They improved the adaptive cruise control, which had actually been introduced a year earlier, but the tech had supposedly got better. And supplementing that was a new safety advance known as the Adaptive Restraint Technology System, or ARTS for short. What it was, it used a series of sensors, including a weight sensor in the seat, to determine if there was a passenger in the car or not. And if it wasn't, then in the case of an accident, it wouldn't deploy the airbag, which therefore reduces your repair costs and everything else. The other thing to note about 2001 model year is by the time you get to 2000, the 4-litre V8 engine no longer has the notorious Nikasil linings that the early cars had. With those early models, if you were running unleaded fuel with high sulphur content, there was a risk that the Nikasil lining would be deteriorated, which would then lead to loss of compression and ultimately engine failure. But V8 engines built from 2000 onwards don't have that problem. And what an engine it is too. 370 brake horsepower, about 382 foot-pounds of torque. And I remember reporting on it at the time with the road tests. I just loved the split personality of this V8 engine. If you just kick down and that 5-speed automatic transmission, drop down a cog or two and you could just propel on into the horizon with such effortless ease. Do you hear that? I don't know if it can pick it up on the microphone, but it's such a smooth and yet eager roar. It just sounds lovely. And that Eaton style supercharger just sort of whining away, it just feels great. If you really put your foot down, it can pinion to the back of the seat, and it's a great driving experience. But if you weren't in the mood for that, amble along, and it'd be so refined, so effortless. And I love that about the XKR. I loved it then, and I love it now. There's not many cars that can do that in my opinion. The ride is superb. The handling's pretty good, particularly in the coupe guys. The only criticism I made of the car at the time from memory was the brakes didn't feel really man enough for such a high performance and heavy machine. I really felt the brakes needed to be better, and it's no surprise that there were some aftermarket companies that offered uprated brakes from the likes of AP Racing and Brembo. And me being a slightly excitable 20-something back then, I wasn't all about the deep walnut wood. I always remember commenting that I'd have preferred to have piano black or carbon fibre, and indeed that was offered on a very last of the line X100s. This car's got the sat-nav system in it as well, which replaced 3 auxiliary dials. Technology's way behind now, so I know the current owner doesn't really use the sat-nav system. And I think aesthetically the 3 dials are actually better, but back in 2000 when this was kind of all the rage, it was probably considered really high tech. But enough about me wittering on, why don't we talk to the current owner, Sue Headley. She's had the car now for nearly 20 years, so she knows what it's like to live with one of these on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I purchased an XK8 because I fell in love with them when they were launched, and it had a problem with the engine, with the Nicosil engine, and after I had the engine replaced, it was never the same. And I was in the garage in Reading, and this was on the forecourt, and I just said I'd like that. I bought it, it was 18 months old when I bought it, and it's registered September 2000. About a week after I'd got it, Andy had bought me a birthday present to go to the Prescott Hill Climb. I took this and had a great day at the driver's school at Prescott Hill Climb. I've been on 2 Jaguar track days at Mallory Park with it. Thoroughly enjoy the car. Brilliant car to drive. I love it. It really handles well, and I just feel comfortable in it, and it just makes me feel good.
But the other thing that occurs to me, looking at this car now with fresh eyes, is how well the design has aged. Those curvaceous lines look really good even today. And even the rear haunches, which I always thought looked a little bit awkward, that slightly sort of tapered bumper line, looks really good. And when it's riding on 18-inch alloys, the stance looks really good. I know some modified cars, they tried to sort of lower it to give it a slightly better stance, but the proportions and the way it sits on the road is really impressive. I think the other thing to note with these cars is they're just getting rarer now, particularly these earlier cars. I know the current owner is very aware of that and is prepared to do what it needs to keep it going. It'd be a real shame to lose a car like this. I've covered many miles in an XKR over the years. All sorts of long drives all around the UK, all over Europe. And there aren't many cars that can consume the miles quite like an XKR can. So there you have it. Reunited after over 20 years. It's great seeing this car again. It's brilliant to see how well an XKR of this vintage has aged as well. And it's still a brilliant car today.